Good afternoon, Susan. Producer Susan, how are you doing?
Good afternoon, Jersey Joe. I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. This is our first podcast after Christmas. Was Santa Claus good to you?
Yes, Santa Claus was very good to me. How about you?
Very good. I got everything I need. I got a nice bottle of liquor that I will put to good use. Find some friends to share it with. It's always good to have something. I got some cigars, so I got liquor and cigars. What else could a guy ask for? Is liquor and cigars? All right. All right. Did your dog get anything?
He got what he asked for. He asked for a raw marrow bone, and that's what he got.
Oh, good. So everybody's happy. All right. Anyway, for those first-time listeners, the name of the show is The Situation with Jerzee Joe. It's a news and perspective you won't hear on TV. You're going to hear some stories you probably didn't hear about at all, and you might hear some perspective on stories you might have heard about, but you might have only heard one aspect of a story. Here's a quick rundown of what we're going to talk about today. Our quote of the day will be from the famed science fiction author Robert Heinlen on taxation and tyranny. Our science segment today, we'll talk about two different measurement scales, the Richter scale and the Scoville scale, and how hot is the hottest pepper in the world. With all this talk about Southwest Airlines canceling 60% of their flights, as a commercial pilot, I thought I would share with you why the last week of the month is the riskiest week to try and book travel, and why you should avoid trying to book travel the last week of the month. And there's a very good reason for it, and I'll explain why. The IRS has come out with the new tax brackets and standard deductions for 2023, and I'll explain why your tax bill next year will be less than your tax bill was this year. If we have time, I'd like to play a 5-minute clip from Congressman Chip Roy of Texas. As you may be aware, just the Thursday before Thanksgiving, the House of Representatives passed a 4,000-page, $1.7 trillion spending bill that was delivered to them 48 hours before the vote. And by the way, I've seen pictures of this. It's a stack of papers more than 3 feet high. They received it 48 hours before, and most of them had already left Washington en route to be home with their families for Christmas. And they used a COVID rule during the pandemic. The House enacted a temporary rule that says because of the pandemic, you could vote by proxy, which was supposed to be a pandemic avoid infection only. And they used this rule to leave the Capitol so they could vote by proxy. And he just unloads on them for not staying around, not debating the bill, not reading the bill, and voting on a bill they haven't then they never read. And I think his anger is well placed. For those who listened to last week's podcast, we talked about the theme last week was women and guns, about women buying guns, women using guns to protect themselves. And coincidentally, this week's taxpayer relief shot also involves a woman who winds up having to shoot a man who violates a restraining order, breaks down the door of her house, and she's forced to shoot him because he got in her house before the cops got there. Does it sound like we can fill 30 minutes with that, Susan?
You always manage to amaze me. I'm sure you can.
All right. All right. Our quote of the day by author Robert Heinlen. He's a science fiction writer. And here's his quote. "There is no worse tyranny than to force a man to pay for what he does not want merely because you think it's good for him." What comes to mind is Obamacare. Remember, if you didn't have the health care plan they thought you should have, they charged you a tax surcharge, a tax penalty. If you don't buy a health care plan that meets our requirements, we're going to tax you for not having it. Now, that he said that quote a decade before that ever came about. I don't even think he's alive anymore. But again, you can probably look to a lot of different things where the government says, yeah, you didn't ask for it, you don't need it, but we're going to tax you for it anyway, and it's going to be here. And I think it just kind of struck a note with me. I don't know if it strikes. Does it strike a note with you, producers?
Absolutely.
So, and it just kind of struck me as something there's too much of going on. By the way, in one of my earlier podcasts, I did a quote by the magician Penn Jillette, and he talked about charity at the point of the gun He said, it's one thing if you voluntarily give your own money to causes, and you deserve credit for doing that. But when other people use their power to vote and say, we're going to force the government to take money from you to give to and use it for charitable purpose that we think should be given to. And if you don't comply with with this legislation we voted for, we're going to send people with guns to your house and arrest you, because if you don't pay your taxes, that's what happens. So he calls it charity at the point of the gun. And a lot of people, well, yeah, we voted for that. We got that bill through Congress. Now we're going to fund this charity. And he's saying you don't deserve any credit for that, because charity at the point of the gun, you get no morality points for forcing other people to do stuff involuntarily. So that kind of goes along with Heinlen's quote, I think. All right. As I recall, Susan, you told me that you had a degree in earth sciences.
Yes, I do.
So you would know what the Richter scale is. What's the Richter scale?
It is a measurement of seismic activity.
Right. So here's a question you probably know the answer to, but a lot of people don't understand the Richter scale. So if I said to most people, how much more powerful is a 6.4 than a 6.2? They'd probably say, 5% more powerful. Well, the Richter scale is a logarithmic scale, meaning that every full number goes up by a magnitude of 10, which means a 6 earthquake is 10 times as more powerful than a 5. Mm-hmm. And a 7 is 10 times more powerful than a 6. So if you take 10 times 10, that means a magnitude earthquake 7 is 100 times more powerful than a 5. You go from a 5 to a 7, and you're talking an increase of 100 times. And let me just tell you what a 6 point, because we just had one off the coast of California. Was that a 6.2 or 6.4? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was in the lower to mid sixes. I forget the exact number.
I think it was a 6.2. People said, 6.2, 6.4. What's the big difference? Well, here's the difference. A 6.2 magnitude earthquake on the Richter scale is the equivalent of 30,000 pounds of TNT. That's 15 tons of TNT, or the equivalent energy of 2 of the atomic bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima in World War II. If you bump up just a little from a 6.2 to a 6.4, that doubles the energy and the magnitude of that earthquake, and you go from 30,000 pounds of TNT to 60,000 pounds of TNT, or the equivalent of 4 atomic bombs. And that's just an incredible jump. So again, most people, I don't think one person in 20 knows that the Richter scale is a logarithmic scale, not a linear scale. So, and by the way, and you go online, there's an Omni calculator, earthquake, and you can play games, and you can put in any magnitude, 6.2, 6.4, and it will express the power of that earthquake in terms like, atomic bombs, pounds of TNT. So anyway, so if you didn't know what the Richter scale was, now you know. But let's move on to the Scoville scale. If you're not familiar with it, the Scoville scale is a scale that was developed to rate the hotness of chili peppers. And by the way, starting off with like bell peppers, red bell peppers, they're a 0 on the Scoville scale. The first one that people are really familiar with are the jalapeno. Now, jalapenos, come in very, in differing, depending on how they're grown, the soil. A jalapeno, which is a fairly hot pepper, can be anywhere from 2,500 to 8,000 Scoville units. I assume, Producer Sue, you've had jalapeno peppers?
Oh yeah, all the time.
How hot do you find them?
They don't bother me. I like a little bit of spice in my food.
Have you ever had a habanero?
Yeah, I like habaneros as well, but that's pretty much my limit right there is the habanero. I don't go any higher than that.
Okay. Well, again, and here's the difference between a jalapeno and a habanero. As I mentioned, a jalapeno can go from 2,500 to 8,000 on the Scoville scale. Habaneros start at 100,000 and can go up to 350,000, which is 15 to 50 times hotter than a jalapeno. Now, up until recently, there was this thing called a ghost pepper. Ever heard of a ghost pepper?
Yes, I have heard of that.
Ever tried one?
Nope.
A ghost pepper is around 1 million Scoville units. I think there was a TV show called Hot Wings or something where they would have guys eat hot chicken wings. And they kept getting hotter and hotter as you moved across the table.
Mm.
And it was until and whoever was the last guy standing, won the prize. I don't think the show lasted very long, but it was about eating hot stuff. Well, the ghost peppers were deadly. I mean, people would pass out, they would throw up. It's just incredible. In fact, I think with ghost peppers, I had a neighbor was into peppers. You would take like a half a teaspoon into 5 gallons of chili. That's all you would need. Half a teaspoon and 5 gallons of chili. There's a new pepper out called the Carolina Reaper. The guy who invented it did it by crossbreeding some peppers with some peppers from Afghanistan. They start at 1.4 million Scoville units, and they go up to 2.2 million Scoville units. And that is 2,500 times hotter than a jalapeno pepper. 2,500 times hotter than a jalapeno. And if you're a fan of the show Dirty Jobs with Mike Rowe, he actually did a segment where he went down and worked on this farm where they grow the Carolina Reapers. And he has his producer there, big burly guy with a beard. And the guy, oh, I love hot stuff. I do hot stuff all the time. Well, they had some oil from the peppers, and they had a little bottle. So he stuck out his son. They had an eyedropper. They put one drop of the oil from one of the reapers on his tongue. Within 3 minutes, he's lying on the floor convulsing. He's vomiting. He's sweating. He's can barely stand up. He's getting ready to pass out. That's how potent the Carolina Reapers are. And I just can't imagine for the life of me people who would. Why would you eat that? I mean, it is so powerful. Like if you got a bottle of it, it would last you 10 years. If you got a little tiny Tabasco bottle of it, it'd be a 10-year supply. So, but hey, it's, some people like, hot stuff. That's a challenge.
I like eating spicy food, but I don't want to cry while I eat my food.
Cry. I mean, water running. His eyes were tearing, and then he started to vomit, and it was just incredible to see this big 300-pound guy just reduced to a pile of jelly by one drop from a Carolina Reaper. Anyway, so now you know what the hottest chili pepper in the world at the moment is, the Carolina Reaper. Mm-hmm. And by the way, the oil is the capsaicin, which is what they use in pepper spray and bear spray. Mm-hmm. So that is, and they actually extract it from peppers like that. All right, so you've heard about the airlines, particularly Southwest, canceling all those airline flights this week, right? And millions of people being stranded.
Yeah, shame all those people couldn't get home to be with their families for the holidays.
Right. Well, as you know, I'm a commercial pilot, and therefore I know something about the regulations. And here's why, if at all possible, you should always avoid booking travel the last week of the month. Under FAA regulations, if you're a commercial pilot carrying passengers for hire, you are limited to 100 hours per month. Now, and here's what happens. That 100 hours starts when you start the engine. Now, I've been on airplanes where they start the engine, they push back from the gate, and then it's icing, and they got to go over to the de-icing pad, and they have to wait their turn. And you wait for 15 minutes before it's your turn to be de-iced. And then you get de-iced, and that's another 15 minutes. And then you go out from the de-icing pad out to the taxiway, and then you sit your number 12 for takeoff. I've been on flights out of Newark where I've been number 14 for takeoff. And it's been an hour from the time we push back from the gate. And there goes my phone that I forgot to. And I've been 14. I've been on the ground for an hour with the engines running. And that comes out of that 100 hours. Mm-hmm. And I've also come back into airports where we've landed, we've taxied over, and because of weather delays, we've sat on the taxiway because there was no free gate for the plane to pull into. And that was another wasted hour. Well, what happens is all these delays build, and they all come out of that 100 hours. And if a pilot and a crew is going to run out of flight time, it's going to be the last week of the month. And if you look at if you were to plot airline cancellations, you would see this spike the last week of every month. So again, if you have any flexibility, try not to book flights the last week of the month, because your chances of having a canceled flight is much, much greater during the last week of the month. All right, so we want to talk about taxes.
Everyone's favorite subject.
All right. Well, the IRS every year, by the way, part of the Trump tax plan was an automatic inflation adjustment for both the standard deduction, which, by the way, 85% of people take standard deduction. And I think once you get down to the middle income brackets, it's over 90%. So there was an automatic inflation adjustment, and there was an automatic adjustment to the brackets. In other words, the bottom of the lowest bracket, the top moves up, so more of your income stays in lower bracket. So let me just give you a little perspective on how those brackets have changed. 2018 was the first year of the Trump tax plan. If you were married, the standard deduction was $24,000. This year, 2022, it was 25,900, meaning the first 25,900 of your income is not taxable. In 2023, which starts next week, that 25,900 jumps almost $2,000 to 27,700. So if you're married next year, the first 27,700 of your income is not taxable. Now, if you're single, in 2018 it was 12,000. 2022 it was 12,950. Next year it goes from 12,950 to 13,850. So just a huge jump in the amount of your income that's exempt from taxation. Now, let's talk about what's happened to the brackets. Now, the first tax bracket in 2022 for single people, that 10% bracket went up to 10,275. And it was 20,550 for married filing jointly. In 2023, the cap on the tax bracket for single people jumps by more than $700 to $11,000, which means the first $11,000 of your taxable income is now only taxed at 10%. And if you're married, the first $22,000 of your taxable income is only taxed at 10%. At 10%. And that's a $1,500 increase from last year. Same thing happened with the 12% bracket. Last year, the cap for single people was $41,775. That jumps to $3,000 to $44,725. And for if you're married, it jumps from $83,550 to $89,450. It jumps by $6,000. So if any of your income was in that 12% bracket, or if any of your income went over the 12% bracket, next year it probably won't, because first, if you deduct your standard deduction of what we say 27,700, so 27,700 and 89, you would have to make more than $120,000 a year of gross income. If you're married filing jointly, unless you're making more than $120,000 a year, none of your income will be in a tax bracket higher than 12%. And by the way, that's why it's called something called the effective tax rate. If you take the taxes you pay and divide it by your gross income, most people don't understand this, but the average effective tax rate, which is the taxes you pay divided by your gross income before deductions, is only about 7%. That number has come down from the high teens 40 years ago down to about single digits, 7%. And if you have kids, it can get down to 2 or 3% because you get a $2,000 per child deduction right off the income tax as your own. So anyway, I did a quick calculation. If you're married and have a house and you have no kids and you have a household income of $70,000, last year you would have paid or this year when you file 2022, your tax bill will be $4,881. In 2023, if you're still making that same $70,000, your taxes owed are going to drop from $4,881 to $4,636. So a $250 break in the taxes you're going to have to pay. It's not a lot, but hey, $250 counts, right?
But you're only talking about federal tax, and then there's those state taxes on top. And unfortunately, we live in one of those higher tax states, Jersey Joe.
I do. But if you live in Texas or Florida, there's no income, and I think Tennessee's another one. There's no state income taxes, but you're right. And places like California, New York has a 12.5% tax rate. New York City tax on another. Didn't we talk last week about a 14.5% combined tax city and tax rate, which is
I
why
forget which city that's for, but yeah, there's those unfortunate cities that have a city tax on top of their state tax.
right. New York City, Baltimore. I'm not sure if Chicago does or not, but that's how you kill a
I
city.
believe Pittsburgh and Philadelphia do.
City taxes on top of.
Yeah.
Denver has an employment tax as well. The city of Denver has an employment tax. All right, how are we doing on time?
You have about 20 minutes in.
Boy,
If you want to.
we're
yeah.
flying. We're flying through this, aren't we? So we got time. So again, I mentioned Congressman Chip Roy, right? And how angry he was at all of his colleagues fleeing the city when they have to build and vote on a $1.7 trillion tax bill. Well, here's Congressman Chip Roy just unloading. He's going to be somebody else is speaking. They're going to yield their time on the floor to him. Here we go. Hang on. Whoop, let me back this up.
Says Chip Roy. Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank the speaker. I thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania. I can't help but be amused that the gentleman from Massachusetts says that we refuse to come to the table. As if the gentlelady who will soon be the chairwoman of appropriations, Ms. Granger, my colleague from Texas, doesn't want to sit at the table with colleagues on either side of the aisle to come to consensus about how to spend taxpayer dollars, or better stated, how to borrow money we don't have. As if that's actually true. What table is the gentleman referring to? What table does he want us to come sit down and negotiate? It's not this table. I don't have the power to offer an amendment on the floor of the House of Representatives, despite being elected by 750,000 Texans.
I'm going to pause that. It's a very important point because the Democrats control the House. He has no ability to offer an amendment to even be discussed or debated. So he just made the point that he can't even offer an amendment to a piece of legislation introduced on the House floor. And most people are probably not aware of that. I think it's a very important point. And we're going to continue.
I don't have the ability or the right to be able to stand up for them and have a debate on the floor of this chamber. Everything the American people is watching right now is a complete sham. It's a fraud being perpetrated on the American people right before their eyes, right as we head into Christmas, sitting here on the 23rd of December, when 6 years ago, those boys crossed the Delaware. We were dealing with Valley Forge, or the boys in 1944 sitting in foxholes in Bastogne over Christmas. We had 18 Republicans who joined with Democrats in the Senate, get on their fancy planes and go home, and we're sitting here trying to do the work of the people.
By the way, I'm pausing again. So I believe there's 435 members of the House of Representatives.
Yep.
They're showing pictures of the House chamber where he's giving the speech on the floor of the House chamber. I don't think there's 14 people in the entire House chamber right now as he's giving this speech on the 23rd of December. And Congress is in session.
Not spend money we don't have, not drive up more inflation, not have 7,500 earmarks for $16 billion for pet leftist.
Did you hear the number of earmarks in that bill?
Yes.
7,500 earmarks in the bill, including naming a building after Nancy Pelosi, by the way.
Projects across this country.
I'm going to back that up. I just want you to hear that again.
Earmarks for $16 billion for pet leftist projects across this country. What you see here on the floor of the House of Representatives should make everybody ashamed. The People's House. Not one amendment has been offered on the floor of this body since May of 2016 in open debate. The gentleman from Massachusetts dares to impugn the character of the Appropriations Chairwoman Kay Granger and those Republicans he says won't sit at the table, when in fact, what you see here is a 4,100-page bill cooked up by a handful of people behind closed doors, brought before the Rules Committee with no ability to offer an amendment, no ability to debate, no actual discussion on the People's House floor. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle know it. And we're spending money we don't have. Go home and sell your projects. Go home and talk about all the pork you're bringing home. But you're destroying the United States of America. Absolutely destroying this body. The American people did not send us here to do that. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle know that. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle know full well that this body is broken, but do not care. $45 billion to Ukraine. Have we had a full debate on Ukraine? Or did we take $45 billion of funding for Ukraine, package it on a $1.7 trillion bill, invite the president of Ukraine to address this body for theatrics heading out for Christmas in order to jam through a big spending Democrat priority bill that the American people resoundingly rejected in November? For 70 years, this body, when we've had a transfer of power in the Senate, we have not done this in a lame duck. Yet that's what my Democrat colleagues are doing. There are consequences to this. You can't go out and talk about inflation and talk about what the American people are feeling right now when they're trying to fill up their tanks with gas. They're trying to have presents for their families. They're trying to pay their bills. And then come here and dump hundreds of billions of dollars into the economy while the Fed's raising interest rates and people can't afford to buy homes and they can't live, and say you're doing the people's work. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle, night before last, were apoplectic that Mike Lee was daring to challenge the idea that we should have a bill that literally prohibits Border Patrol from securing the border.
I don't know if you caught that, but that Mike Lee is a Republican senator from Utah, and in the spending bill, there's a provision that, yes, we're going to give you money, but you are forbidden from using this money to increase border security. No fences, no more people, no more agents. You cannot use this, no more drones. You cannot use a single dollar of this money we're giving you to increase or impede, increase border security or impede the flow of illegal immigrants into this country, which I think is shameful that they put that in the bill. But here we go.
Wanted to try to fix that, try to extend Title 42. My Democrat colleagues rejected it. And I sat here on the floor and they were more concerned about catching their flights for Christmas, coming to me and saying, we can't be here over Christmas. Well, why the hell not? The American people deserve us to be here over Christmas, actually fighting for them instead of trying to catch planes while half this body are going to vote by proxy. Half this body's not even going to be here. And they're lying. They're lying on forms saying that they're voting by proxy for COVID. And it's a lie. And half this body's going to do it. You know it. And it's destroying this country. I'm not going to just sit here and roll over on this. This is going to continue. The American people are going to know precisely what's happening to them by the people's house. I yield back.
Gentlemen.
Producer Sue, what'd you think of Congressman Chip Roy rant?
You know, the American people should be upset that those 400 people didn't do their jobs that they were elected to do.
Yeah,
and he's blindly voting.
Yep. He's absolutely right. And it's disgraceful. And if you want to see him, you really have to watch him. He's very passionate. So just Google Congressman Chip Roy speech. It was, again, it was December 23rd. It was last Thursday. And everything he said is 100% correct. There's 7,500 earmarks, if I can, how many billions of dollars. And he's talking to an almost empty chamber. The House is in session, but they all went home. And I guarantee
and nobody blindly vote.
Blindly vote on a 4,000-page bill that you didn't read. And it's a bill that has some, and the fact that they specifically say to the Border Patrol, oh, and you can't use a single dollar of the money we're going to give you to increase border security. You can't put up any fences, no razor wire. You can't buy any new cameras. That's just absolutely disgraceful. And obviously, probably most people who listen to this podcast probably weren't aware of that. And I guarantee you 99% of the American public were not aware of that provision in that spending, that 1.7 trillion spending bill. By the way, that's just discretionary spending. Everything else, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, makes up about 70% of our total spending. Oh, and interest on the national debt, which is $360 billion a year. So that 1.7 trillion is just the discretionary part of our budget that has to be voted on. Everything else is on autopilot. The other 4 trillion, actually it's 4.5 trillion is on autopilot. So that's kind of where we are. I think we're down to about 5 or 10 minutes.
Yes, you have about 8 or 9 minutes.
All right, we're going to move on to taxpayer relief shots. And for those who haven't heard this before, taxpayer relief shot, we call them that. Let me have the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida, explain this to you, why we call them a taxpayer relief shot. Here we go.
Somebody's breaking in your house, you're more than welcome to shoot them in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. Hopefully you'll save taxpayers money.
And again, that's the sheriff of Santa Rosa County, Florida. And what he's saying is correct. If you arrest a thug, first there's going to be a trial, and all of these guys are, they're broke. They don't have their own attorney. So there's going to be a court-appointed attorney. And then you got prosecuting attorneys. And, and to try a guy for a felony is probably going to be a week-long trial, probably going to cost the taxpayers $150,000. If he appeals it, there's another $100,000. If he's convicted, he goes to jail, that's $80,000 a year. So if you send him to jail for 10 years, that's $800,000. And if he gets out early on probation, well, then you've got to assign a probation officer, and he's got to check in, and you get more money. So he calls it a taxpayer relief shot. And there's another sheriff down there, Sheriff Grady Judge, also in Florida. Here's his view on taxpayer relief shots.
I would highly suggest that if a looter breaks into your home, comes into your home while you're there to steal stuff, that you take your gun and you shoot him. You shoot him so that he looks like grated cheese.
So again, this is not just me. You've just heard 2 sheriffs are saying, yes, if there's a thug in your house and doesn't belong there and your life's in jeopardy, we prefer that you shoot them. Anyway, I know we're running out of time. So again, it's just coincidental that last week it was about women defending themselves with guns. In this case, there's a video. This takes place in Pensacola, Florida. You can Google it. It's about a guy it's a father of this woman's children, but he's violent, and she has a restraining order out against him. And he is violating this restraining order. And the video shows him trying to kick down the door. He's repeatedly kicking and kicking, and he finally gets through the door, and he's got a knife in his hand, and she's in a bedroom. Well, when he finally gets to the bedroom with the knife in his hand, here's what happens.
The sheriff says the woman was protecting herself and her family. Take a look at this video from the front porch.
He's kicking and kicking and
You
kicking.
can see the man kicking the front door on James Taylor Lane and screaming at those who are inside. Then the 54-year-old man goes back to kicking in the door. After a few tries, he gets in. The sheriff said once inside, he armed himself with a knife and threatened to harm his children's mother. A woman in a bedroom said she was in fear for her life and shot the man in the head. He died on scene. The man had an active domestic violence injunction filed on him, and the sheriff says when this all happened, the man was on his way to an anger management class. Reporting in Pensacola, Cody Long, WKRG News 5. Caught on camera.
So they found so what do we call it when they found him deceased on the scene?
Dead right there.
DRT, dead right there. So again, this was, I think we did 2 last week, and another one is just coincidental, but we've had 3 in a row now where obviously this was a big guy. And if you go just Google Pensacola man, shot, and he's kicking and kicking, and it probably took him 45 seconds to break down that door, but that gave her time to get her gun out.
Because a restraining order is just a piece of paper.
Restraining order is just a piece of paper. All right. Well, so you got anything you want to add?
No, I just hope that everybody enjoys the rest of their holiday season and has a safe and happy new year.
All right. And same my sentiments exactly. And again, I want to thank all of you who took the time to listen to this podcast, for giving up 30 minutes out of your busy day to listen to me ramble on about things I find of interest and importance. I hope you learned something today and found some tidbits of interesting as I did. If you want to see some of the materials and story links you heard me talk about today, you can find them on the Jerzee Joe website at jerzeejoe.com. And Jerzee spelled J-E-R as in Robert, Z as in zebra, Jerzee, jerzeejoe.com. If you want to email me with a comment, question, or suggested show topic, you can do that by simply sending me an email to joe@jerzeejoe.com. Just remember JERZEE. Other than that, I've got nothing. So Sue, will you be around next week?
Yep. Well, same time, same place.
Same time, same place. All right. Well, thanks for your help, and I'll talk to you next week.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.